we're grateful that you joined us today. My name is Paige. I'm with Deschutes Public Library, and I'm joined by Mike Cooper. He is our fearless leader for today. We are exploring science fiction and fantasy. And today, in particular, we're exploring the hero's journey, which is kind of quintessential to so much of our beloved science fiction and fantasy stories. Mike Cooper is a graduate of the OSU Cascades MFA Writing Program and has led several writing workshops for Deschutes Public Library, Caldera Arts, OSU Cascades, and the Workhouse in Bend. Mike, we're so grateful you're here today. Thank you. I'm going to turn it away to you. Lead us through the hero's journey.
All right. Thanks, Paige. And thanks, everyone, for coming. So I'm going to just give a quick overview of the hero's journey, and I'm going to share a PowerPoint. And as I go through this, please feel free to ask questions, throw in comments. I am by no means the authority on the hero's journey. It's something I've studied. I'm fascinated by it. I've used it in my current novel. Like I said, I'll show you what I know of it. Like I said, if anyone else has comments, ideas, questions, throw them in there. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to do this hero's journey. Are we seeing a giant screen that says hero's journey with pictures on the top and the bottom page?
Yes, we are. It looks great.
Yes. Perfect. Good. Okay. I have two screens and I'm never sure what I'm seeing. Okay. So here we go. So what is a hero and what's the point of the journey? The hero typically is the mighty warrior, frequently in mythology, the child of a god or a king that goes on an epic quest. There are other types of heroes that can also follow the hero's journey. The anti-hero that often does not display admirable qualities. Pictures here are The Godfather, Batman, Conan, Homer Simpson, and that dude from the Pirates of the Caribbean. We also have the Byronic or romantic hero, the troubled hero, the rebellious hero, the self-destructive hero, the Phantom of the Opera, Snape, Heathcliff, and then my favorite, Holden Caulfield, there from Catcher in the Rye. So the hero's journey, or the monomyth, is a template of a broad category of tales that involve a hero who goes on an adventure and in a decisive crisis wins a victory, then comes home changed or transformed. That's the basics of the hero's journey. This is, if you've ever been in one of my writing classes, you've seen this in some form or another. This is what's frequently called Freytag's pyramid. So we start with the exposition. The guy, something goes wrong with his phone here. We have the rising action. Some sort of monster appears in the phone, and he has to struggle. At the climax, he takes on his heroic self and defeats the monster. And at the end, he is triumphant here. So this is basic story structure. And to me, basic story structure is really kind of the beginning and the end. So the real basics of story structure is that you have somebody who is one way at the beginning, something happens, and they're another way at the end. That's the simple version of it. This is a little cartoon by Roz Chased from the New Yorker. I'm not sure that you can see it really super clearly, but here's this little girl sitting on the beach with her parents. She wades out into the ocean, gets deeper and deeper and deeper, struggles with these monsters, ends up on this island, yells, help, help, finally sighs, swims back home, comes back and sits down with her parents, right? The key to this, this is funny, but the key to this is that here she is saying, help, help, help. And finally, she manages her own rescue. So that's a lot of what the hero's journey is about. This is If you look at the picture of me, you'll see this book, and that's the book that's there, the Hero with a Thousand Faces. This is Joseph Campbell put this together, and he's credited with this idea of the monomyth, or the hero with a thousand faces, the hero's journey. The truth is that he's just looked at all kinds of stories from all different cultures through all of history and put together this thing. We humans have been telling each other the hero's journey since we could talk. He's mapped out, there are, I think, 17 different stages in Campbell's version of it. The one that I'm going to show you isn't quite that elaborate. But if you've got yourself a lot of time and want to wade through some really interesting reading, The Hero with a Thousand Faces is a good book to read. I personally got the audio book from Deschutes Public Library and listened to it in my car when I was driving back and forth teaching in Madras one term. So that's how I absorbed it. Here's the basic, here's the simple version, okay? And this one goes clockwise, starting at the top with the hero's journey. We start with the character in the ordinary world. We go to the call to adventure and often the refusal of the call. Then we go to crossing the threshold, the point of no return. Once the character has gone there, there's no going back. We encounter trials, friends, and foes. This is the rising action. We meet the mentor, who's our guide. We reach our major conflict, often that I think Campbell calls it this, the dragon's lair. We have a moment of despair where the hero is nearly defeated. Then we have the success, or the magic elixir that the hero finds. The hero heads home, and then the champion returns. So these are the 10 stages of the hero's journey. Then I'll go through each of these. And so I said I used this in my current novel. I am not a huge believer in pre-plotting or outlining work. I kind of like to let the work. Like to let the work develop itself. And what I've found in my writing is that if I pre-plot and plan too much, then as the writing progresses, I find myself veering from the plot, and it frustrates me because I want to go back to the plot, but I want to do the writing. So what I did in my novel is I had this outline, but I didn't have anything filled in for it, right? I just had these generalizations. And as I went along, I checked to make sure that I was putting something in there. So this is an empty outline. This is an empty form that you can write into. And I found it to be really useful. All right, so let's get started here. The hero in the ordinary world. This is Frodo or Bilbo, I'm not sure which one of the O's, sitting in a tree in the Shire reading a book, right? This is his normal, ordinary world. We want his name, we want his place, we want what they do, we want this illusion of security, and this is our original status quo. This is where we introduce our setting. This is before anything happens, okay? Here we have the call to adventure. That's often referred to as the inciting incident in plot structure. Something changes or someone needs them. And then this refusal of the call is they don't believe they're up to the challenge. So here's Luke accidentally bumps R2-D2, and here's a holograph of Princess Leia saying, help us, Obi-Wan, we need you. This is his call to action. As this progresses, Luke says, hey, I'm just a farmer. I can't go gallivanting around the universe, right? He's refusing the call. I don't have the skills to do this. I don't have the ability to do that. In some cases, I don't even want to do that, right? But the call has been made. Crossing the threshold is the commitment to the adventure and to the defeat of the enemy, right? We're being called on to defeat the enemy or take on this challenge. At this point, there's no way back. This is Neo from the Matrix taking the red pill. He's offered the blue pill or the red pill. You can take the blue pill and none of this would have happened, or you can take the red pill and you can commit to this adventure, right? Then we have our trials, our friends and our foes. Here's Harry Potter learning how to ride a broom, learning how to use his wand, learning how to use magic, discovering what it is to be a wizard. He has his friends, Ron and Hermione. In the case of Star Wars, we have Han and Chewbacca. In The Wizard of Oz, we have the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion. And then we have our foes, right? Malfoy and Voldemort are Harry's foes. The Empire and Darth Vader are the foes of Luke. And the Wicked Witch is the foe of Dorothy. And we have meeting the mentor, the helper or the guide, the one who shows them how to use their power, the one that teaches them, right? Yoda, Gandalf, Glinda the Good Witch, Morpheus, Dumbledore. These are the classic, the trainers, and they're almost always old. And you'll also notice that they almost always die. This is kind of part of this of the monomyth too. And part of the reason that they die is because the character has to surpass them in some way. You see this a lot of times in literature where the son either kills the father or succeeds the father, or the daughter succeeds the mother, or something like that. The Dragon's Lair is the big conflict. This is the Death Star. This is where we're approaching that big battle. Are we going to win? Are we going to lose? Right? This is the thing that they were called upon to do. The Wicked Witch, the defeating the Wicked Witch, any of the big battles that take place in these heroic journeys. Often we'll have then the moment of despair. This is where the hero feels that they're defeated and they must rely on their inner power. This is where we have hope. This is almost every fight scene that you see in a movie where the hero has been beat up, is laying on the ground, the bad guys jumping up and down saying, I did it. And then the camera cuts to the hero who looks at it and decides he's going to get up and get back into it, right? This is where the inner power comes and gives them the ability to defeat the antagonist, whether it's internal or external. The magic elixir is what they get from this. It's more than just a physical prize. Oftentimes, the hero is sent off to get something, to get an actual thing, but the thing itself is not what they learn from or what they gain. It's this inner transformation, this self-actualization that they have, or in Neo's case here, the ability to stop bullets, right? Or Luke's ability to use the Force, or Dorothy's ability to click her shoes together and say there's no place like home. Homeward bound, we head back out of this world, right? We head back to Kansas, back to the real world, back to the world where we started. But we are different. The champion has returned and the champion has changed. They are now master of both worlds and capable of handling new demands and challenges, and they have grown in an amazing way. And that is, in a nutshell, the hero's journey. So I am up for taking questions on that. That went a little faster than I thought it was going to go, but I'd love to just take questions and chat with people.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. I think that was a really good overview of some of our favorite stories, but kind of breaking them down and piecing them out. I think that offers us a new insight into it. So everyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. We can see both. But if you don't mind, Mike, I'll start off with a couple. Something that I noticed that I think, what is your interpretation of these people, our hero? Hero is such a big word. That's the person, the epitome, if you will. But our heroes so often are nobodies. What do you think is why is it that we want someone who is a nobody rather than somebody who is a god or who is infallible? What is it about that it's always a nobody?
I think that part of that is that's who we identify with, right? So if we see someone who is more powerful than us, um, then we don't um, then we don't identify with them, and the growth that we want to see, and in some cases. Uh, the Buddha, the story of the Buddha is a classic example of that. He is the son of the king, right? And he is in a situation where everything is perfect and he's got everything that he wants, right? But what he discovers is that that isn't the key to life, right? He goes out and sees the various things and goes on his journey and discovers that those aren't the things that are wonderful. You see that probably in a lot of the Eastern Eastern religions, where that happiness, that material happiness, isn't actually the key to it. But I think it's because we want to identify with it, right? We want to say, I'm Frodo Baggins, right? I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm a moisture farmer. But there's always, not always, but often there's this sort of thing that Luke turns out he's actually the son of Darth Vader, right? And there are these sort of, they are special in their own way, right? Neo is the chosen one, right? He's not just some dude who's a computer programmer, right? Often they're the chosen one, and they have this ability to go on. But that's a good question. I think it's because we want to be able to identify, right? We the common person whose stories are meant for, we don't identify with the higher ups. So I'm seeing some questions here. Mary's asking, does the hero's journey work in short fiction as well as novels? I think yes. You know, short fiction is very linear, and I relate that Freytag's pyramid. You can write out Freytag's pyramid with as many points as you want, and I think that the hero's journey is often written in a circle because you start at home and go to home, but it's also a linear thing. There's a growth, so it can apply. I think that you could very easily write a short story that incorporates all 10 of those sections. Stephanie's talking about whether it applies to all genres. Does it work better for some genres than others? I think when Frankenstein is probably a great example of you'd mentioned the horror genre. Frankenstein's a great example of that. I mean, that's a very, very much a hero's journey. I think Dracula does that. I get scared reading horror books, so I don't read a whole lot of them. I read some Stephen King when I was younger, but I think he uses that that format in there, not as clearly as others. And as far as applying to different genres, I think certain genres have certain formats that they use, right? And when I'm talking about filling in the blanks on the hero's journey, if you're writing a mystery, a typical mystery or a thriller or whatever, detective story or romance, you'll have those fill in the blanks for that genre. The expectation is basically what you're looking for, right? It's the expectation of the reader. They say, I want to read a romance that's like all the other romances, that I like romances, right? So I want them to be the same. And when you throw them off, that I think you could easily sneak the hero's journey in. Like I said, my novel is, I would say, literary fiction. It doesn't, unless I told somebody it encompassed the hero's journey, they might not be able to pick it up. It's just there.
Yeah, and to that point, Tom's question here about Thoreau, that's Henry David Thoreau, he leaves Concord for an extended stay in the wilderness. And when he returns to Concord, he sees it for the first time. And I think that's a great point. That's a real life example, if you will, of the hero's journey. And I think that's very relevant. Thoreau went out, conquered some demons, may or may not have snuck to the Emersons once in a while for some homemade pie, but we won't fault him for that. Right. And then he came back to his regular world. He returned home, kind of changed for it. So that's a real life example.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that idea of the of the other world, right? Crossing the threshold into the other world. And there's a lot of literature that talks about us citified folks or living in towns going out into the woods to experience whatever, the devil, Jesus going out into the desert, right? Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, chatting with Mara, and going through those, through that, the challenges of that other world, right?
And Trudy asks, do you think the hero's journey could work or unfold in a memoir?
I think, I not only think it could, I think it almost should, in some way or another. I think that if you're writing a memoir that says, this is what happened to me when I was little, and then as I got older, this happened, and then I got a little bit older, and this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened in the end. It's a series of events. I think that memoir should include story, and I think that whatever happens from the beginning of the memoir to the end of the memoir should encompass challenges and how the character, the protagonist, the memoirist, deals with those challenges and how that person changes at the end. And you could say it's another world. We have friends, we have foes, we have trials, we have mentors, we have all those things. And it doesn't, because it's laid out in that clockwise circle, it doesn't have to happen that way. Things can happen in different ways, right? We can not, at first Luke's dealing with this old man that he met in the desert, and he's just some old man, right? We don't know that this is Obi-Wan Kenobi, one of the most powerful Jedis in all of time, right? So it's your perception, right? My grandfather was an old man when I was younger, but as I got older, he became a mentor to me as an example, right? So he was always there. I just didn't see it, right? So yes, absolutely. I think that to some extent it works really well in memoir. It's something to think about. This is to me almost even after the fact, after you've written it and you're looking at it and saying, what the hell have I just done? To be able to look at a plot structure like this and say, how do these fit? And am I missing something, right?
And I think memoir in particular as a form lends itself really well to, we are ordinary people and yet we aren't. If you're writing a memoir, there's something extraordinary about you and about your experiences that you are compelled to share. That seems quintessential to a hero. That call, there were some times that you did not want to answer the call. I think that was a really fascinating aspect of the hero's journey. So much of it felt to me very grounding. We're just regular people. I'm not the chosen one. I'm a computer programmer. That is really compelling because, like you mentioned, Mike, all of this is internal. So they aren't necessarily, magic beans from a beanstalk. It's actually the courage that Jack had to get up to go up the beanstalk. So it's so much is internal. Then I think that's what is so relatable about this entire experience. So there's a million examples. You listed a bunch. Do you have personal favorites in the hero's journey? It could be science fiction, it could be fantasy, it could be anything. Do you have favorite movies or books that you like to explore with this theme?
I like so what you were just talking about there is about that, that internality of the character. And so in the hero's journey, and you'll see this in almost every superhero movie, every fantasy film, most sci-fi films, you'll see these things, and they're really blatant. And that's kind of a fun thing, because one of the things about the hero's journey is that those points there, those 10 points that I showed you, those are plot points, not story points, right? probably with the exception of maybe that despair moment, right? The plot points trigger the story points. And what I mean by plot and story is that plot is this physical thing that happens, and story is this internal emotional thing that happens because of it. Cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. So Disney films, Disney cartoons, right? So I grew up with, you know, I have two daughters, and we watched every Disney cartoon that came down the pike. And even as they got older, I would still go by them and say, come on, let's watch this. Come on, let's watch this. Because they're laid out so perfectly. But yeah, I don't know, my hero is Batman. And Batman has so much history behind him. You know, if you look back in the films of the 30s and 40s, into the TV program that I grew up with, you know, with my father, and then the sort of dark and foreboding Dark Knight series that came out in the comics and is in the films that we see today. There's so much of that in every single film, and you'll see it in Star Wars too. Every Star Wars film is a hero's journey, and it's all a hero's journey, right? It's all set out that way. George Lucas actually studied with Joseph Campbell. It's very intentional in Star Wars, right? He plotted it out that way. I'm looking at Tom's question here. I left an isolated village in Indiana, which had a vast majority of Polish Croatian, with my parents when I was 10 years old. In Oakland, California, I was placed in a public school classroom full of Anglo-Saxon strangers. To me, that was a location for my hero's journey struggle. Overwhelmed, and I managed it, right? Exactly, right? That's memoir, and that's us getting bumped into somewhere else, right? People who go into the military, going off to college, moving, going to summer camp, you know, I mean, all kinds of things that you can look at that would put you into that scenario. According to Campbell, what might be the earliest versions of the hero's journey, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Homer's Odyssey? Is this style of writing limited to Western civilization, or is this universal theme from other world cultures? So Joseph Campbell compiled all of the cultures of all the world. There are lots of Native American things, Aboriginal things, you know, African stories, European, a lot of our religious stories. I mean, the Bible is a series of heroes' journeys, right? And it's how we have always, as far as I know, and not that I was there, it's how we have talked to each other. It's how we've told each other how things are. I mentioned I study Buddhism, and I can sit and read about all the tenets of Buddhism and the various things that you should do, and the 10 these and the 3 those and the so on and so forth. But when you start telling me the story about you know, the monk on the edge of town, or you know, the soldier and the monk and the this and that, I'm like, yeah, story, good, I get it. I get story because I can be part of that. Whereas the rest of it is sort of abstract. So we understand through story, and that hero's journey model is convincing, and it's easy to remember too. Stephanie, are there hero's journey narratives that don't end in victory? And are those still called a hero's journey, or do they become something else? I think, yes, the journey is the journey. There is often failure. So, you know, that's the tragedy versus comedy, right? What is it? You get what you asked for, but realize that that's not what you wanted. You don't get what you asked for, or the thing that you were searching for. It's the Midas thing, right? I want to be rich. I want everything that I touch to turn to gold, but then I touch my children, and then I realize, oops, right? So, yeah, I think there are definitely tragic endings, or, you know, trade-offs, right? We get home, and the person that we loved has aged or died because we were in a time suspended place or whatever it is, right? Yeah. There's always these horrible lessons that we learn about life and death. Yeah. I'm sure you've got some examples of that, Stephanie. You could probably throw some of those in the chat if you want to share. Stephanie, I know you read a lot of horror stuff. I'm sure that a lot of that, I mean, simply can't turn out well, right?
We could go on a rabbit hole down horror, because I think horror movies and horror stories are fascinating heroes' tales, because there's so much of our humanity being presented to ourselves. I think that is why I can't do horror very well, because it's just a little too real for me, which is very funny. I think that's something that's not highlighted enough with science fiction and fantasy, and I think it's something that you're kind of getting at with these big sweeping epics, you know, Bilbo and Frodo Baggins, you know, hobbits in this made up world that they have to take this ring of ultimate power and throw it in a giant volcano. Like, that's not, I mean, we live in Central Oregon, so the volcano part, yes. And, you know,
right.
Hobbits are, you know, 5'4"-ish, so I could be one. But in general, that's crazy. That's not real. And yet, so much of it is so applicable to just ourselves, our humanness. And I think that's something that science fiction and fantasy do so well, is presenting the more human aspects back to ourselves, but through a slant, at an angle, so we're not confronted so head on. Unfortunately, horror doesn't let us do that. So I think that's a fascinating genre. Stephanie says, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, maybe, as an example. The hero is killed in the end, but it doesn't quite start out as a hero's journey, so she doesn't know if it really qualifies.
Again, and I'm not super familiar with that. Like I said, I had a girlfriend in high school who loved horror films, and I went to one with her, and I don't know if it's so much that I'm unable to look at it. It's that it frustrates me so much. It's like, stop, you know, turn around, get in the car, leave the camp, leave the building, go somewhere. Don't keep pushing it. Once we realize that we've created a monster, or that we're you know, feeling a little odd about hanging about with this guy who's drinking blood. So I'm like, just don't do it. But that's me. But we do have lots and lots of reasons to continue on, whether we want to save that person or be compassionate or empathetic, or we're just stuck. But yeah, and you know, sometimes these things are, there are multiple heroes in our journeys, in our heroes' journeys, right? The journey that Sam Wise goes on with Frodo is not the same journey that Frodo goes on, right? Which is why a sweeping novel or something like this can have those multiple plot lines with multiple heroes' journeys, whereas in a short story, your character is going to do this thing, go through this stuff, and then that'll be that, right?
Yes, that's an excellent point. Do we have other questions out there for Mike? I think this is such a great time of the year to be talking about sweeping epic fantasies, the spooky night. The days are getting shorter, so we're spending so much more time reading books, and especially watching horror movies right now. And Stephanie can't think of many horror movies that end with a hero's victory. Even if the hero is victorious, like in Alien with Sigourney Weaver, the end always feels a bit ambiguous. Ripley is still in space without her friends after triumphing over the aliens.
I think in that case, there's such a base instinct to just be alive in that movie. That's the end goal, is to stay alive. And there's, I think, a sense in that movie, and I'm not sure, I haven't seen it for a while, but there's a sense in that movie that Sigourney Weaver has actually saved the Earth from these aliens. You know, that if she kills them all before she leaves, then she has done, you know, gained this higher power or whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, so and they're sometimes you know, the end is that trade-off. It's like, you know, it's the bloody king standing on the battlefield with dead bodies all around. Is like, is that victory? I don't know, but did we learn something? Maybe we're just feeling the tragedy of life. Shakespeare was good at that stuff too.
Yeah, sometimes just survival is the ultimate victory.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, particularly I think in space films, you know.
Space films freak me out. That is just such an unknown element. It feels like I would rather take on Mordor than space.
Right.
Yes, I would definitely.
Yeah,
Mordor
that idea
versus
of
Mars.
returning. Yeah, the idea of returning home is so clear in space. It's like you're definitely not home until you get back in your coffee shop on planet Earth.
Well, please feel free, everyone, to put more questions in the chat or the Q&A. Mike, do you have parting words while we're waiting for more questions? Do you have anything else that popped in your head as you were going through, or?
No, I think, like I said, I think if you're fascinated by story, and how we tell story, and how we communicate with each other, I think taking a look at this, and I know that there was a series on Netflix, or might be on Amazon, but there was a series of Joseph Campbell, and there's an interview series of him, which I think you could probably catch a lot of on YouTube. Really, really fascinating guy. Really in-depth research. I mean, he went around the world and got this information. And Joseph Campbell himself is, I think, a relatively enlightened person, having watched him talk. So it's worthwhile tracking those down. Like I said, if you Google Joseph Campbell, you'll probably find some YouTube videos of some discussion with him. He did a series of interviews. I can't remember who he did them with, but I think knowing how story works and how story works for us, how we perceive story, helps us write more better stories. To understand what has been tried and true for thousands and thousands of years in humanity, to see how that's unfolds, helps us in short stories, long stories, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, whatever it is. So I think it's worthwhile to take a look at these, to take a look at the myths, and we're not really reinventing the plot, the plot points so much. Even today, if you pick things apart, you'll find a lot of these things, even if they weren't intended. Trudy says, a lot of what you're both saying makes me think of what is going on worldwide with COVID-19, wondering what you think about how the hero's journey is at play during these times. We were just talking about that yesterday, is that the stories that are going to come after this are going to be pretty fascinating. I think a lot of what's going to come after this is going to be pretty fascinating. One of my students in one of my classes is writing about the efficacy of masks, right? We're not going to know anything. We're not going to have any definitive proof on this for a long time. It's just an ongoing conversation, right? I just read a story in the New Yorker, I think it was Lori Moore, talking about her father, a short story, her father dying of the coronavirus in the hospital, and she's there visiting him, and that's the present of this. The past of this is going to be very interesting, and the heroic things that have happened through the course of this, right? You know, the discussion of the World Trade Center bombings. You know, if we look at them afterwards and we look at and see that heroism that took place as opposed to what was happening at the time. So yeah, I think our literature is going to change because of COVID-19. I mean, I can't watch TV right now and see people right next to each other without yelling, "Put a mask on." And it's a film or show that was made 2 or 3 years ago. So our mindsets are different.
Definitely. There will be a shift just as blatant as postmodernism. There will be a pre and post COVID literature vein that will be marked. People will be able to study it, 40 years from now. Just like the way we look at T.S. Eliot and or like the Transcendentalists 200 years ago, we will be able to look at our literature and our media from this time with some fresh eyes. So we are currently in the middle of the hero's journey. We are not sure how it ends yet, but discussions like this and opportunities to have a dialogue about what keeps us human is such a great opportunity to take some grounding, remember what we love, remember what we know. We are all the heroes right now. And Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been fantastic. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Paige.
Yeah, we're all on the journey together. So we have to keep connecting in these spaces.
All right. Thanks, Andy and Kathy and Denise and Mary and Stephanie and Tom and Trudy. Glad you showed up. And thank you very much, Paige.
You're so welcome. Everyone, we would like to say thank you for joining us at this program. Check us out at DeschutesLibrary.org for all of our other great, fun, free programs. We are doing a whole exploration of science fiction and fantasy. We will be joined on Monday night to see Walida Emarisha. She is the editor of Octavia's Brood, looking at how speculative fiction and science fiction can actually lend themselves to social justice movements. Check that out and check everything else out that we have coming to you at DeschutesLibrary.org. And we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.